Hey class, this video is going to help with Statcrunch with the two proportions in 9-1. So the main idea, you can watch the videos that come with the program. They do use the traditional formulas, which you're welcome to do it by hand. Some people just prefer that. I'm going to show how to do everything in Statcrunch. So I'm going to share my screen. And here's my thing here. So we have two proportions. So we're going to be comparing means and two proportions, but we'll start with this. I wanted to put together just like the symbols. If I'm talking about two proportions, I would say something like 15 out of 200 women like some, I don't know, like something. And then maybe 20 out of 210 men like this. How do we compare those men versus women with a proportion? Okay, so all the ones that have a 1 on them like this is going to refer to your first sample. The 2s will refer to your second sample. So you'll be given 2 samples of data and you're going to compare them using confidence intervals and also hypothesis testing. All right, so let's go through these real quick. Remember, the regular P or P1 and P2 refer to the population proportion. Population, not sample. Okay, if I put the hat on it, now it refers to the sample proportion. That's typically the data you have, okay? The P is going to refer to more of usually something to do with the claim, okay? So N is still our sample size, right? And 1 would be the sample size of the first sample, and 2 is the sample, second sample. Q hat is still going to be your complement, your 1 minus your P, and your X is your number of successes in your first sample. So if I say 10 out of 200 women, the 10 is the number of successes. So we think of this number over this number is your sample proportion. Okay. Another thing, they talked a little bit about a pooled sample, and that is where we add them together. They're pulled together. I don't think you have homework on that topic, but, or one question, pretty basic. I didn't assign that idea all the way. Okay, so one other thing I want to make sure you put in your notes, you can pause and write that all down if you'd like. The confidence intervals for a claim about two proportions. If I'm doing a confidence interval, which I'll show you how to get it in Statcrunch, what does it tell me? So if this interval does not include 0, so maybe the interval starts at the number 1 and goes to the number 5, it does not include 0, then there's evidence suggesting that the two values are different. If it includes 0, so you go from negative to a positive, then that is evidence suggesting that they are similar or the same on our values. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You have a couple questions about that. So let me go ahead and I'm going to put in an example here straight from your homework. You might even end up with the same one. I hope not, but this is just one from your homework. So this question says, a simple random sample of front seat occupants involves a car crashes is obtained. Among 2,755 occupants not wearing their seatbelt, 32 were killed. Among 7,851 occupants wearing seatbelts, only 15 were killed. Use the significance level of the 0.01 to test the claim that seatbelts are effective in reducing fatalities. Okay, so what do we always have to do when we start these is our null and our alternative, our claim, okay? So if you look at this, you always have to have equals on your null. So this A, no. C, no. F, no. E, yes. D, yes. So one of these three has to be our proportion. Then we have to decide, are we saying one is greater than the other, one is less than, or not equal? So for this one, we're saying the first one, the first sample given, has a greater number of casualties than the people wearing their seatbelt. So we picked greater. But what does your null always have to have? Equal, okay? So notice we have P1, P2. So we're saying sample 1 and sample 2. Then what are we going to do from here? So I'm going to minimize this. And we're going to go to Statcrunch. And we're going to go to Stat. And remember, you can just go to statcrunch.com during a test as well, or a quiz, and log in with your My Math Lab information. Okay, so we're in Statcrunch. We're going to go to a proportion because we have a proportion, but now we have two samples with summary. We don't have our data, we have summary. And our first sample, we had 32 people killed. 32 people killed, and there were 2,755 total in that first sample. The second sample was 15 people killed, and there were 7,851, and our test is equal, and then it is greater. Okay, compute. All right, so you saw the difference there. So then we're going to be asked, what's that Z statistic? What's that p-value? So what did I go to again? I went to stat, proportion, two sample with summary. Same kind of data. Now I'm going to bounce over here and show you. So we got that Z statistic right here, and it was basically 0.000 for our p-value. So what does that mean? This is the part most people mess up. If your p-value is lower, right, less than your significant level, which it is, so I'm saying the p-value is less than, I had to pick that, then the significant level of 0.01, 0 is less, then we reject the null. So what are we saying? Out with this, in with this, reject the null. We have evidence that the P1 is greater than P2. Okay, so there is significant evidence to support the claim that fatality rate is higher for those not wearing your seatbelt. Okay, so part B, we're talking confidence interval here. So what would I do in my math or in Statcrunch? Let's go bounce back real quick. We're in here. I'm going to go to edit because I already have my information in here. And now I want a confidence interval. Does it tell me to use? So I'm going to use the value of 99 because it said 0.01 in this one. Okay, so we just switched to confidence interval, lower limit, upper limit. All right, and it still has our data here. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of our problem? I put in 3 decimal places. So we went from the lower to the upper. We put those numbers in. And then here's one of the questions, kind of like we were just talking about in our, at the beginning here. Because, so what can we say based on this confidence interval? So see how it doesn't go negative to positive? It is all in the positive. And so then we would say that they are different. We're saying that they're different, right? Because they don't have a 0. Because the confidence interval times do not include 0, I had to pick do not. It appears that the two fatality rates are not equal, which we just said. We have evidence that one is greater than the other. Because the confidence interval limit includes only positive values, it appears that the fatality rate is higher for those not wearing their seatbelt. Okay, what do the results suggest about the effectiveness of seatbelts? The results suggest that the use of seatbelts is associated with lower fatality rates than not using your seatbelts. So be careful that none of them are saying causes. So they probably have one that The result is inconclusive. The result suggests that the use of seatbelts is associated with not using. So you just have to read these carefully. I mean, it's really the same thing that you're stating. Okay, so we went through our confidence intervals and our two proportions using Statcrunch. Okay, so if the null is low, what do? If the P is low, reject the null. I said it wrong. If the P is null, let it go. I think that's what I was thinking of. There's both of those. So remember, if your p-value is less than the significant level, you're saying out with the null, in with the alternative. The claim is correct. If this would have been a higher p-value than your significant level, then you would have said reject, or excuse me, fail to reject the null, and you would have been like, we accept the null. That's what we think there's evidence for. And out with the alternative. Okay. All right. Hopefully this helped you with using Statcrunch.